Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Good afternoon and welcome to Afternoons on the Dove. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and today it's going to be a thrill. In fact, I think you're in for a real ride today because not only do we have a great guest, we got some great pictures that tells a tremendous story about some missions going on in Honduras. But I'm delighted to have with us today Pastor Richard Evans. He's pastor of Discipleship and Missions from the First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville. And if you listen to the Dove on Sunday morning, you probably have heard him preach quite often. And he adds to the confusing mix of accents around here because we have a Brit, we have a Kiwi, we have a Russian, and now we have you, Mr. Wales. Nice to have you with us, Richard.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. You are being the pastor of Discipleship and Missions. What is that? What do you do?
I oversee everything from adult education, nurture, care groups, Bible studies, all that sort of thing, and then the outreach and the missions.
Oh, so you do everything that Pastor Larry Young doesn't want to do.
Well, you said that, Perry, not me.
No, that's great. Good to have you. In fact, I was just telling you before we went on the air, Peggy and I were in the UK just a couple of weeks ago in the beautiful country, and I've been to Wales. It's just gorgeous. And where'd you go to school there?
I went to Aberystwyth, the United Theological College in Aberystwyth in West Wales.
In West Wales. And then you graduated from there.
Absolutely.
And went on and became ordained with the Presbyterian Church there.
That's right, Presbyterian Church of Wales. And I was ordained in 1998 and had a 4-church pastorate for 8 years.
So you actually handled 4 of them?
4 at the same time, yeah. It's one of those little differences.
That's busy Sundays, huh?
Well, I only preached in 2 or possibly 3 sometimes on a Sunday, and the other Sundays other people would cover.
So how did you end up in the Rogue Valley?
My wife is from Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
We met on my 26th birthday when I was visiting my cousins. And we fell in love and got married. And then she came to Wales and lived with me for 5 years there. And then we decided it was time to move. And she wanted to be near her father, and her father retired out here in 1993.
So you came out to the Rogue Valley.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you've got some interesting stories, and I want to talk most recently. You've been to Honduras quite a few times. How do you work down there with what? What do you do down there?
We've been going for 5 years now to a missionary hospital in Honduras, in Belafante, Honduras, which is on the northern coast. It's been there since the late 90s. It was fully opened in 2003. We've been going since 2007. And we take a mixture of nurses and handymen and myself as a pastor and various different things to go down there and help in the work at the hospital and out in the community.
That's wonderful. Well, before we get into the actual stories down there, how has missions changed you as a pastor?
I think it's enabled me as a pastor to be a more effective pastor, to just realize that we're actually in the mission field wherever we are, whether we're abroad, whether we're right down the street. People are people wherever they are, and it's made me realize that increasingly, and just to have even more of a heart to share with people, to get alongside them and to minister to them wherever they might be, whoever they might be.
You know, I've often experienced as I travel, when you go into some second and third world countries, you come back and you not only appreciate living in America, but more importantly, the things that we have that other people don't have,
right,
and the things that we have on a daily basis that they may never ever see. Has a way of putting life into perspective. You know, all of a sudden you realize, oh, God, forgive me for wanting more,
right,
when so many people have hardly anything at all.
Absolutely.
So you've been part of Honduras, and tell us about your recent trip. And I know you have some pictures to share with us, and we're not in a real hurry here, so we'll take our time.
Sure.
But this trip was pretty impacting for you.
Absolutely. And I think for me, one of the most impacting things is the change that we've seen over the number of years in some of the individuals that we've known for those number of years, and being able to be involved in their lives over a period of time and to see things change and grow and develop. So that's been really important.
Now, as you're down there, do you acquire the material there and the supplies you need, or do you bring them in? How do you say?
We take a certain amount of things down with us. We only take what cannot really be gotten there, because we like to keep the local economy, the money in the local economy whenever possible. But there are certain items that we need to take down, and we take 2 suitcases each full of donations, medical supplies, medications that cannot be gotten down there or can't be gotten very easily. to the hospital itself. And also this time we installed some water fountains. And so we took we took 4 water fountains with us, but all the equipment to put them in was locally provided, the piping and the steel and all that kind of thing.
All right, let's get into some of these pictures, because in particular, I know that, tell us about the little boy.
Yeah.
Tell us about this little guy.
As I say, we've been going for a number of years, and last year we actually only sent a small team of 3, but they did some incredible work. A little boy called Miguel Angel came into the hospital. They lived 5 hours walk up the mountain, and they'd walked this small, tiny newborn baby in, and basically he was having trouble breathing. And 2 of our nurses, Laurie Bell and Amber Shields, basically bagged him, breathed for him for a number of days in shifts. And there he is with his little oxygen mask on. And this year, the promise was made last year that we would return for his first birthday party, because by the time they left, he was doing a lot better. And so this year we drove an hour up the mountain, and they walked 3.5 hours down the mountain. We met up on the side of the road and had a birthday party for this wonderful little rambunctious, fat little 1-year-old baby boy who's a miracle baby, quite literally.
Wow.
And miracles happen down there all the time. And
wow.
And then this was another birthday party that we went to for a 2-year-old in the local community.
The old piñata, huh?
Yeah, you know, children are the same the world over. They love candy, they love piñatas, they love games, they love music, and they're just the same, except, as I say, you know, you were saying earlier, they don't have a lot of the distractions that we have. And life is hard, but in some ways...
simple.
Yeah.
How do they receive the gospel down there? How do you present it?
You know,
I mean, I know in caring for them,
sure.
obviously, that is a huge part of that.
Just, you know, building those relationships and being able to share who we are, why we do what we do. There's a church, several churches have been planted, one in particular that we've been involved with through our missionaries, John and Penny Alden, that are down there, that we go down there to support, actually related to Amber Shields, one of our nurses that goes every year. And we're part of a church plant there, and we've been involved in physically building some of that church and supporting that church, and just seeing it come leaps and bounds. And I got to preach there for the first time on this trip. So how did
that? So you through an interpreter?
Yeah, through an interpreter this time.
Now, first of all, you got a Wales accent. And you're dealing with a poor guy. That must be quite the experience.
It was, and it's only the second time I've ever done it. I went to Africa in 2004 and did the same thing and preached there. And again, it's one sentence at a time, one complete thought at a time, and sometimes it falls apart, but most of the time the message gets across. So it's a great joy.
Yeah, I would imagine what little I've done, I've had the opportunity to speak in Mexico a couple of times, and I realize, you know, theology, as great as it is, doesn't really play a big role. They just need the simplicity of the gospel.
Right.
Have you learned that?
Absolutely. You know, we make it far more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I've always thought you take the passage of scripture, whatever it might be, and say what it says, and just share it, share your heart. And so that's what I did.
Oh, that's wonderful. And the response?
You know, it's great. I mean, it was a small group, but they got the message and were able to understand what I was trying to share with them. And it's a joy. I was also able to share a similar message with the missionaries. They gather on a Thursday evening as missionaries together to pray, to worship. And when I'm there, I'm able to give them communion as well, which is something that they don't get as a group together very often. They go to their own individual churches at the weekends.
I would imagine pastors welcome you to be a part of what's going on there and work with them. You made the comment just a few moments ago that miracles are more common there than we see here. What do you mean by that?
I think we're looking for them. That's the difference. We actually recognize them when we're there far more. We're not caught up in, oh, this can be explained away, or, you know, we're going to do this through our own energy and action. Whenever there's an emergency, whenever there's a need, the first thing that is done there is prayer, rather than we'll try everything and then we'll pray, which seems to be the attitude in the West on the whole. Not everywhere, obviously, but a lot of the places. And so prayer is the first thing that is done, and we just attribute it to God far more than we do here, I think.
You know, it was just so interesting because now we're living in a condition here in the United States where we really need to see miracles. Yeah. But I wonder if we're seeking them.
That's the thing. I think they're happening all around us, and we just do not attribute them to God, and we don't notice them as much, or don't seek them, don't ask for them, don't expect them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're talking to Richard Evans today. He's a pastor of discipleship and missions from the First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville, and recently back from Honduras. And what other missions are you involved in besides down there? Do you have any other that you travel to?
Me personally travel to, I haven't, but our church goes to Mexico every year with the More Ministries and builds houses down there. That's the youth group, really go down there. Mark Schmore, our youth director, takes them down every year, along with another church, Redmond Church. And then locally we're involved with Habitat for Humanity.
I wanted to talk about that because I know that Pastor Larry Young is very passionate about that, and I've sat in on a couple of those meetings, which is a fabulous ministry here in Southern Oregon.
It is. It really is. And it gives people an opportunity to have hands-on experience and reach out and really help a family, and not forgetting that family has to build alongside. It's not done for them, it's done with them.
Right.
And so that's a real opportunity for people.
And I know that Pastor Larry is interested in other churches working with them on that.
Absolutely. This is called the Apostles' Build, the idea being that 12 churches, 12 apostles get together and fund and build and help build a home. And so far we've had not 12, but we've had other churches involved, but we're always looking for more to be involved in that way.
I really want to encourage pastors, and if you're listening or watching today, here's something locally you may want to consider, and get a hold of Pastor Richard or Larry Young out at First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville. Link up with these brethren and work with them on this Habitat for Humanity. It is a fabulous program right here in Southern Oregon. I don't know how many homes. Do you know how many they've done so far?
It's in the 40s here, and then
in the
they
40s.
They also tithe and to the Habitat International as part of that, and they've built a lot of homes abroad through that.
Yeah, you talk about a great program for your church, and especially the men in your church, to get out and work alongside other brethren and build homes for needy families. And the whole concept, the whole program is just really classy deal. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to get a hold of them out there, First Presbyterian Church. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to come back and deal with some of your experiences and the transition you made from Wales to the United States, and other things that you might be involved in. We'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Well, we're back, and our special guest today is Pastor Richard Evans. He's associate pastor out at First Presbyterian Church. He's the pastor of discipleship and missions, just returned from Honduras, sharing with us some really interesting stories of the mission field down there. And their church is very active in missions, and I know that you guys have been to Japan, and we had some gentlemen on and some folks on from Japan right after the tsunami. Right. So, but you've been there since then.
We haven't been there since then. We have been talking in little groups about the possibility of going at some stage. As some people are aware, John Wilson, who's a missionary there, has been a missionary there for over 20 years, is obviously from our church in the sense that his parents come to our church and are involved in our church. Have been for a long time. And so we're in contact with John. We support John, and there is talk of at some stage of possibly going to physically help.
And that country is really going through it. They're still trying to recover.
Yes.
I went through Tokyo, 2 months ago, and I was surprised when I got off the plane that they gave us this clear warning that we had to walk through this pad that had a solution on it for our shoes because they were fighting hoof and mouth disease as a result. I mean, we're talking nationwide now. Sure. So you wouldn't think of that in Japan and Tokyo and around like that. And they told you right up front, if you had golf shoes with dirt on them, they're going to take them. So they were pretty serious about recovering from that. And then I saw on the news the other day where they're talking about a 20 million ton island of debris that's now still out in the ocean, floating towards Hawaii. It may hit Hawaii sometime this next week. So a lot going on. But man, those people had a lot to recover from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Where else are you involved?
We support many missionaries throughout the world. We have what we call our Big Six missionaries that we support internationally, which is John and Penny Alden in Honduras, who we've been talking about, John Wilson in Japan. We have Bob Blinko that heads up Frontiers Ministry, which is church planting in Muslim countries. We have Marilyn Escher, who's translating in Senegal the gospel, the whole Bible into the Wolof language.
Oh, wow.
Rog Hill, who used to be an elder at our church years ago, is actually with Youth for Christ, military youth, and works in this country and various places. And there's one other that is escaping my mind. It will come back to me in a moment.
I want to go back to your roots, Richard, being from Wales. And boy, so much of our church history and our church existence comes from your country and you know, the UK. And you kind of go, wow, you look back over there now, it's been so secularized. Are you surprised by it?
No. I've grown up in that generation, I guess. It hit me one time when we were doing an after-school club in a church school locally, and actually all the churches in the village got together to do this work together, which was great. And we turned to the children and said, "Okay, today we're going to learn about Daniel." And now, when I was a kid, if you said Daniel in the Bible, you would say lion's den.
Right.
These children had no clue who we were talking about. And that kind of hit me. That was several years ago when I was in Wales. And at that point, I went, okay,
wow,
we need to start 3 steps back from where I thought we had to start.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You know, and it's interesting because I fellowship with a lot of people who are from, you know, the Commonwealth country, the New Zealand, Australia, and there in the UK. And it's interesting. They say, well, you Americans, you're going to be where we are. It's just a matter of time. And I go, well, wait a minute. Don't you guys understand freedom? We really do fight for it. At least I thought we did. But, you know, you look back at the history of the church that comes from your homeland.
Right.
It is so rich and so vibrant, and yet it's so lost. I mean, the gap between then and now is just remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in, when we went through London, they were saying that the Muslim population now is 13%. They're really worried about the Olympics coming there because will they have good security? We broadcast on DAB throughout the UK, and then we're on Skype not Skype, but Sky for the television. And it's amazing what we can't say. I mean, socialism has an incredible grip upon the gospel there.
It's true. I was always amazed that you couldn't have when I first started coming to America many years ago to visit, and there was Christian radio on, I was amazed because we wouldn't get that at home. You know, I would have to get a magazine to hear the Christian music and the radio and that sort of thing. And there was big fights to try and get Christian broadcasting licenses and that sort of thing. So it amazed me in that respect. However, I mean, I do see church growth. You know, there have been new churches planted, even in Wales in the years before I left. So it always isn't all dark. But the thing we have to realize is that we need to be welcoming of missionaries that are coming from other countries now to Wales to share the gospel that we shared with them many years before.
How does that make you feel?
You know, they were partners in ministry. You know, it made me feel weird at first, but these guys were passionate, they were on fire, and they remind us that we need to be the same way.
You know, and yet, is there a hunger? Do you think there's a hunger in Wales and throughout the UK?
I think there genuinely is. I think there just needs to be directed to what that hunger will be satisfied by. You know, rather than trying to have it filled by other things, you need to really point them to the fact that actually this hunger you're feeling, this desire to have an emptiness filled within you is Christ-shaped, and it's not shaped by sporting activities or pop stars or whatever else. As good as some of that stuff is, it's not going to fill you up the same way Christ is going to fill you up.
You know, it's interesting because we never thought, it took us 22 years to get a license in the UK. 22 years. Was that about right, Steve? 22 years? I think it was 22 years to get a license in the UK to broadcast on DAB. Mm-hmm. And even then, it's tremendously scrutinized. Of course, now we're on television. But once that cat's out of the bag, so to speak, I mean, once the gospel's out in a public manner the way it is now, the response has been phenomenal. But there's this still attempt to pluralize everything. It's okay, you can talk about any God you want, just don't raise Jesus higher than any one of them. How do you battle that?
You just stick to saying what you got to say. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. When I was still in Wales, I was very fortunate and very blessed. I could still go into schools and conduct collective worship, and they wanted me to do that, and they encouraged me to do that. In fact, the local education authority required them for me to do that.
Really?
Yeah. I was a governor of a school, as put on by the local education authority as a religious governor, as the local minister, and that was a really good thing to be involved in. And I know as I was leaving Wales that in England, there was talk of them bringing in some restrictions in the fact that you would have to give a script of what you were going to say before you went in. That was the rumor that I was hearing. And I was glad that I never had to do that, because I don't work very well to a script. And I have to say what I have to say. And if a child responds to me, I have to respond to them. And I have to be able to proclaim the name of Jesus and share it.
Well, you know, I've heard you preach on many occasions. You're a great speaker. What I so appreciate it, there's no doubt, Richard, when you preach, I hear it from your heart. I mean, I know you have some notes up there, but it's coming from here. So obviously something stuck from Wales to where you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Do you ever think there'll be, you know, I went back and I'm a student of the Welsh revival, and I love the Rees Howells story. I've read it many, many times. I think I try to read it once a year just to kind of put my own mind back into perspective. But man, it's got some rich history there. I mean, some really outright revival type stuff that happened there.
Absolutely.
Do you think that'll ever return?
I think it will. I think, you know, to me, whenever I study the revivals, and I did that in high school, I did that in college, and I've done that since, there has been two key elements always in every revival. One is that people are together across any denominational barriers and are praying for it. And two, it's usually when the church is at what is perceived to be a low ebb.
So maybe it's poised for another one.
Could well be. Could well be. And we need to be just actively seeking, searching, and praying for it and being part of that.
Now, let's fast forward to you're in America now. You're an associate pastor of a great Presbyterian church here in Southern Oregon. You guys have been through the storm with your building program and through some other things.
Sure.
But the creeping, if I can use this secular cancer that's coming upon our culture against the church, do you sense it?
I sense it in the fact that perhaps some of our members and people who don't attend every week. You know, perhaps they come a couple of times a month or a couple of times a year and that kind of thing. And I think it just needs to be a priority again in our lives. And it's not just a matter of turning up on a Sunday. It's about being involved in small groups, which is part of my ministry, to oversee that ministry, and really seeing as important to grow as a Christian yourself, to grow your family, to encourage your community, and allow that to be like an anti-cancer, if you like, that fight back to that secularism.
You sense a hunger among young people these days?
I do.
In what way? I mean, they're certainly looking. There's no question about they're seeking. But do they know what they're seeking for?
I hope they do.
I mean, we know that they're seeking for fulfillment,
sure.
but they fill it with so many other things.
They do.
And how do you kind of slide the gospel in the middle of all of that?
I think, again, it does come back to relationship, just building that relationship, being very solid yourself in what you believe and why you believe it, standing firm on the gospel and sharing it, and allowing kids to find that stuff out for themselves, you know, with guidance. You know, being able to help to see children and young people discover and to realize and make those connections and to see the Spirit calling on their hearts is just amazing. It isn't my main ministry. My main ministry is with adults, but we've got some great, you know, Mark Schmar, our youth director, is just wonderful. My wife, Alex, actually works with the junior high as well. Big hat off to her, because junior high and me not necessarily mixed too well. And a lot of other volunteers that are involved. And I think that's another way, getting adults involved who are believers, involved in ministry opportunities. You know, they grow themselves as much as they're teaching, they learn. And I think that's true for myself as well.
You know, one thing I've heard commented a lot about your church is with its expanded growth. I know you guys went through an incredible storm. I'll never forget the morning that I had Pastor Larry on, the morning after the city council voted everything down. And the world pretty much come to an end at that moment. And we went on the air to encourage people to help give some money towards the legal fund there. I'll never forget that moment. And you guys went through an incredible storm. You held together as a church. You held together as a family. But what's really interesting is, if I get the feel for it, First Presbyterian Church of Jacksonville now has this reputation of being a family church. It seems like the core of your congregation is families.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would. And young families certainly, but also extended families. You know, we've seen grandparents start to come with the grandchildren, and the children reaching out to their own families and bringing people in. You know, our motto for the church is a family church for the family of God, and I truly see that. I felt part of the family. I was actually in the church for 14, 15 months before I was on staff. I was attending the church as I took a break from full-time ministry, and then the opportunity to go back to ministry came. And so I already felt a part of that family, and didn't want to leave when I felt the call back to full-time ministry. I wanted it to be in Jacksonville, and the Lord provided, so that was great.
Wow. Do you ever want to pastor someday yourself?
You know, up until very recently, I was a head pastor of 4 churches for 8 years.
Yeah.
7 days a week. You know, and I love being part of a team
you're
now.
Pretty much burned out. All right, I got that. No, but I mean, you think ever again?
One day. Until recently, I thought, no, I just love being an associate pastor, and I am a pastor in that respect, and being part of a team where we're very much part of each other's ministries without stepping on toes and work together. You know, the last 6 months, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world again.
Yeah,
who knows?
well, you know,
God knows.
God has a way of...
God's got a plan.
He does. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're delighted to have with us today Pastor Richard Evans from the First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville. As you can tell by watching him and listening to him, he is from Wales and has a rich history from there to here, and doing a great work as the pastor of Discipleship and Missions. We'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Well, we're delighted to have in the studio with us today Pastor Richard Evans, Associate Pastor out at First Presbyterian Church in Jacksonville, sharing with us some of his stories and missions work as he's been all over the place, and just recently returning from Honduras, where they had some fascinating work down there, and really a great story of a young boy that's a miracle boy, from having have somebody help him breathe until a year later, where now he's on his own. It's just wonderful. Before we go over to South Africa, because I know you do some work down there, tell us about some of the things coming up in your church, because you guys are going to do, with the cooperation of some other churches, a live nativity this Christmas season.
That's right.
Whoa.
Right. We've been planning for
Is that one of the drive-through
months.
thing?
You know, it started out as going to be a drive-through.
Okay.
And then an opportunity to have it at what is now Bigham Knoll, the old Cascade Christian High School.
Yeah.
That came up as a walk-around nativity. So that is now the plan, coming into fruition, hopefully, here in December. So with a number of other churches involved, and it'll be scenes that people will be guided to. There'll be narration that will be played, and people can see the action and then move on to the next scene and around.
It's wonderful. All right, that'll be at the old Cascade High School there in Jacksonville.
Yeah, outside,
and be a walkthrough. I think that's wonderful. You know, get all bundled up and warmed up and ready to go.
People drive miles and miles to see Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Hey, come and see the real reason for the season.
And do a walk around there.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are some of the other things you're going to do for the fall?
We have our Harvest Festival, our annual Harvest Festival, coming up next Monday. We usually have anywhere between 1,200, 1,400 people that come. Carnival booths for the kids, games, candy. A real alternative to Halloween. Always held on Halloween, but it's our Harvest Festival. And it's just a great time when people come to us. Yeah. And for a number of people who are now in the church, actually, it would be the first. They will turn around and say it was the first time that they ever came into our building and had contact with us, that they came to a Harvest Festival.
Yeah. So next Monday.
Next Monday.
From when to when?
5:30 till 8.
5:30 to 8. It's remarkable because you guys transform your sanctuary. I go, whoa.
Yeah, we'll be tearing that thing down after the second service on Sunday, next Sunday, and change it all around.
Okay. All right, let's go to South Africa. You have some work down there?
The other missionary that I couldn't think of the name of earlier is Barbosa, and he's down in South Africa with One Challenge, and he's been there for a number of years, and we've been supporting him for about 20 years, and he just comes back again, great stories of being able to share the gospel there and work together there, and I have a little heart for that area, having been to Southern Africa, not South Africa, but Southern Africa in 2004 to Zambia.
So what part of South Africa are they in?
Actually, he is now the director for South Africa. So
for all of South Africa?
Yeah, he's now in Johannesburg, but he was in Mozambique. He's now in Johannesburg and has got a bigger
There's some great
role.
work down there. In fact, our affiliate there has Radio Pulpit, that broadcast throughout that whole area. Been to Johannesburg up to Pretoria. And then, of course, now they got 2 radio stations that's covering all of South Africa and 3 radio stations that are covering Madagascar, the island, which is, and the stories are remarkable. It's amazing how the gospel cuts across culture and all of the different things and gets through. It's just a wonderful thing to see happen. Well, what's next for you?
Well, as I say, we've got various things coming up. As with the harvest, we've got an arts and crafts fair. We've got to try and retire the little bit of debt that we've still got on the building that the building you mentioned earlier. We're always part of the Victorian Christmas Parade in Jacksonville. We always have our nativity floats and make sure that Christ is still in Christmas. So we're looking forward to that as well. And a number of things. Obviously, I mentioned adult education earlier, and we're always looking to start new care groups and really get people connected, committed, not only to Christ, but to each other as well, so that they can really care for one another and grow in their faith together. So we're trying that.
Let me back up a little bit. Can you tell our listeners and viewers, when your church finally got the permit to build, it still came with some interesting restrictions to it, but you ended up with 3 buildings.
That's right.
But the 3 buildings had a theme to them.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, I can only tell you secondhand because I turned up a few Sundays after they were in the new building. So, but my understanding from what I've been told is to fit in with various codes and whatnot, there had to be kind of a history to the building. So we have one that looks like a barn, and some of us refer to it as the barn. That's the Christian Education Building. We have the main sanctuary, which I'm very thankful looks like a church. So many churches don't look like churches these days, but it looks like a church to me, with the bell tower and the bell from the historic church. And then our administration building, which kind of looks like a house. And in fact, some people thought Pastor Larry was going to live there, which was never the case, of course.
Yeah, from the story I heard was that the church originally started in a house, moved to a barn, and then moved to a church.
Right.
And that theme is kind of what was carried out when they relocated, that the house and the barn and the new church would be the 3 buildings that represented the history of the church. And it goes back over 100 years, doesn't it?
There you go. You could well be. You know better than I do. I just know we've still got our historic church and still use it a great deal, which is a great bonus to us and I think to the community as well.
I think it is too. How is it being used now?
Our youth groups use it on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Various community groups use it. AA groups meet there as well. Actually, another church, Lumen Day Church, meet there on a Sunday. So it's used throughout the week and it has great potential.
And it's still a historic landmark.
It is
for the community.
Absolutely.
And you took the bell out of that tower and moved it over to the new one.
That's right.
That's right. Boy, you can hear that bell ringing. It's just wonderful.
It is.
Just wonderful. Well, Richard, this has been great. You got a interesting portfolio of all the things you got to do. I want to come back to home groups just for a moment because they seem to be really growing with other churches as well. And it fits into a lot of the research that we have seen in the past where people who will come to a home group before they go to a main church sometimes. And is that how you're viewing it?
You know, we looked at it. We had many groups that were meeting at the church building. And so we started to think, well, if they met in communities, if they met geographically with folk that they lived near as well as went to church with, that has potential then to invite people along that perhaps live within that community and then move them in the direction of church as well. So there is definitely that side to it as well. Myself, I now lead a group in West Medford where I live on a Thursday evening. And I must say, it's nice to only have to pop around the corner. You know, as much as it's only 5 miles or so to Jacksonville, it's still nice to go around the corner and get to know some folk that live close by.
Do you think that's the future?
You know, my vision is that we become a community of communities. And so that as much as Sunday is important, and I will never deny that Sunday is very, very, very important, mainly what we're there to do on Sunday is worship God. To grow, we need to be in a smaller community and connected to one another. And certainly as our church grows and is currently a middle-sized, what I would consider a middle-sized, although when I came it was huge to me. My 4 churches that I had in Wales, the largest was 100 and the smallest was 10. So to be in a church our size was big. But as we grow, we need to make sure that people aren't lost along the way and people can feel welcomed and invited and included and they can grow.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Because I think everything we read about home groups, people do have a tendency to follow somebody else to a home group before they really would follow them actually to a church. So it does become an incredible arm of evangelism for the church.
Absolutely. We had a situation in Wales in one of my churches where friends of mine that actually now live in New Zealand, moved there the week after I moved here, invited some Christian friends and some non-Christian friends to their home for social events and gatherings, and then were able to invite those people, those non-church people, to church, and instead of them knowing 2 people, they knew a dozen people. So they'd walk into a congregation knowing a number of faces, and that was an easier in for them.
You know, what's interesting is that in this day in which we live, it seems like the gospel can be demonstrated in a small group. I'm not against preaching or evangelism by any means. In fact, I'm totally for it. But there seems to be somewhat, people aren't drawn to that model as much as they are to others. And yet, sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate the Bible with a lot of theology. And I know that's important. It's got its place, especially as you're maturing and growing. But boy, it seems like can we just keep the gospel simple and reach people with God loves you and he has a plan for your life?
I think that's absolutely right. That's one of the things that I've particularly seen on my mission trips over the years, that the gospel is far simpler than we make it. It's not simplistic, but it's simple. And as you say, just reach out and say God loves you and why he loves you and how he loves you and that Christ died for you is the main thing.
When you go like to Honduras and you're preaching down there, so what is your message among really the poorest of the poor?
It is that basic message that God is with you through all the circumstances and situations of your life, that it doesn't matter whether you're the richest of the rich or the poorest of the poor. God still has a plan for your life and still loves you and still wants to be with you. Our church has been going through the book of Acts this whole year, and I actually preached a message down there that I had prepared on Acts, and it was when Paul and Silas were in prison and were freed. And in that passage, there are three sets of freedom and release. There's the young girl that's freed from the evil spirit. Paul and Silas are actually released from prison twice, once by God and once by the authorities, but they are free throughout that whole experience. And the jailer himself, who is freed from his bondage to sin and death and given life in Christ. So that is the message I was taking down there and that I shared with them and that seemed to be applicable to all of our situations.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Where are you going next, or... Wait,
I'm going to Wales for a short visit. That's my next trip.
Well, do a little evangelism over there.
I'll try.
No, that's wonderful. Going home to see family and stuff like that. All right, again, I want to remind people that coming up, First Presbyterian Church, along with the cooperation of other churches, something I don't think we've seen in the Rogue Valley. I think the last one we saw was many years ago. They had one in Ashland, but the bottom line is that they're going to do a live nativity this year. There in Jacksonville. It's going to be a walkthrough. Give us the details. Do we know the dates yet?
It is the weekend before Christmas, the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay, and it'll be in the evening, obviously.
Yes.
And I don't know how many stations. You know how many stations?
7.
7 stations.
Yes.
All right. So
everything from the Annunciation to the Wise Men visiting.
Really? That's wonderful. All right. And again, the location?
That's at Bigham Knoll, the campus at Bigham Knoll there.
Yeah, and that's the old Cascade.
The old Cascade.
All right. Richard, thanks for being with us today. It's been a joy to have you. And again, First Presbyterian Church out in Jacksonville. And your service times, give a little plug.
9 a.m. and 10:30, 2 identical services.
Okay, and the church location is
425 Middle Street.
All right, so you'll see it through the little park area there, but you'll find it. All right, thanks for being with us. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us today on Afternoons on the Dove.